I was 16, the winter had happened, and my family lived in a small cabin on the edge of a frozen lake in northern Minnesota. Winters there felt endless, the kind of cold that bites through layers, the kind of silence that presses against your ears until you almost hear things that aren't there. My parents worked long shifts at a lodge 20 miles away, so I spent a lot of evenings alone, watching old movies and trying not to think about the emptiness outside. One night, a blizzard rolled in suddenly. Snow hammered the windows, and the power flickered before giving out completely. The cabin went dark and quiet, except for the wind. I lit a few candles and sat by the window, staring into the storm because there was nothing else to do. That was when I saw him, a figure standing on the frozen lake. At first, I thought it was a tree blown loose by the storm, but the shape was too tall, too thin, and far too still. He stood straight, facing the cabin, unmoving in the blinding snow. I leaned closer, squinting, but the storm was fierce, and each gust buried him in white. When the wind eased for a moment, I saw a pale face, or what looked like one, staring directly at me. My breath caught in my throat. I blinked hard, and the figure was gone. I told myself the storm had played tricks on me. Shadows and snow can create strange illusions. I tried to shake it off, but I kept glancing back at the lake, half expecting the figure to appear again. Later that night, after the snow had calmed a little, I heard soft tapping on the back door. At first, I thought it was a loose branch hitting the wood, but the tapping was too steady, too deliberate. I walked to the door slowly, every step heavy with dread. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it over the wind outside. I pressed my ear against the door. Another tap, then a whisper, faint, shaky, almost fragile. "Hello?" The voice didn't sound threatening. It sounded lost, cold, desperate. My hand reached for the lock, but something, instinct or fear, made me stop. Instead, I forced myself to ask, "Who's there?" No answer, only silence and snow. I ran to the window, hoping to see headlights from my parents' car, but the road was buried under deep snow. I was alone. I was about to step back from the window when a reflection made my blood freeze. A face stared at me from the glass, pale, thin, eyes dark and hollow as if winter itself lived inside them. I spun around, but the room was empty. My breath trembled in the air. The tapping started again, slower this time, but somehow more impatient. I backed away, whispering, "Please stop," like a child speaking to a nightmare. A few minutes later, the tapping stopped. I waited, listening. Nothing, just the wind. I almost convinced myself it was over when I heard footsteps in the snow outside, slow, dragging steps circling the cabin. The sound moved from the back door to the windows, passing each one like the person outside was checking them, searching for a way in. I held my breath as the footsteps paused right beside the window I was hiding near. I could feel the presence on the other side of the glass. I didn't dare look. I just pressed myself against the wall and prayed the stranger would leave.
Eventually, the footsteps faded. The silence after was worse than the storm. I stayed awake until the sun finally rose, sitting against the wall with a blanket wrapped tightly around me. When daylight came, I gathered the courage to go outside. The snow around the cabin was marked with footprints, long, deep, bare footprints. They led from the lake to every window, every corner, every door. The prints stopped suddenly a few feet away from the lake. No return trail, no sign of someone walking back, just an abrupt end. My parents returned later that morning after the roads were cleared. I tried to explain what happened, but they didn't believe me. They said snow can create illusions, that I probably imagined the footsteps, that fear makes the mind see things. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. Every winter since then, when the lake freezes and the nights grow silent, I remember the face in the glass and the voice whispering through the door. And sometimes, late at night, when the wind is still and the world is quiet, I think I hear soft tapping on the back door again, like whoever came that night never really left.
I was driving home for Christmas that year, trying to beat a storm that the radio warned would shut down the entire highway. I should have listened, but I was stubborn, and the idea of spending one more night in a cheap motel felt worse than driving through snow. The road was almost empty, just endless white stretching into the distance. Thick snowflakes hit the windshield so fast they looked like static on an old TV. After an hour, the storm swallowed everything. Signs, trees, even the horizon. The headlights could barely cut through the white wall ahead of me. I was gripping the wheel tighter than I realized, my knuckles pale and aching. Somewhere between two forgotten towns, I saw something standing near the roadside. At first, it looked like a snow-covered log, but as I got closer, the shape lifted its head. It was a woman, standing in the snow with no coat, no gloves, just a thin dress that clung to her as if it were frozen to her skin. Her hair was long and wet, hanging like black ropes around her face. She didn't wave for help. She didn't move. She just stared at my car as I passed. My stomach twisted. I slowed down, torn between stopping and leaving her behind. But when I checked the mirror, she was gone. The road behind me was empty. A few minutes later, my car jerked violently to the side and the engine sputtered. The dashboard lights flickered as if something had drained the power. I pulled over, heart racing, and tried to restart the engine. Instead of turning over, the radio crackled to life. Through the static, a faint voice whispered, "Help me!" I froze. The car was dead. The storm was getting worse. And in the mirror, I saw her again, the woman, standing behind the car, her hands hanging at her sides, her head tilted like she was studying me. Fear rose so fast I almost couldn't breathe. I locked the doors immediately. She walked toward the passenger window slowly, each step deliberate, like someone dragging heavy chains through the snow. When she reached the window, she leaned forward. Her face was pale blue, lips cracked, eyes wide and empty. She didn't blink. She didn't move. She just stared at my car, with a look so hollow it felt like my soul was being pulled through my skin. I shouted, banging the horn, hoping it would scare her away. The sound echoed uselessly through the storm. She didn't react. Then she placed her hand on the glass. Her fingers were long and thin, almost skeletal, and frost spread from her touch, crawling across the window in delicate white patterns. My breath fogged the air as I whispered, "Please go," but she didn't move. Instead, she leaned closer until her forehead touched the window. Her lips parted slightly, and I could see the cold steam curling from her mouth. She whispered again, "Help me!" But her voice sounded wrong, like it came from underwater, distant and broken. I don't remember deciding to run. Fear made the decision for me. I threw open the driver's door and stumbled into the storm. The snow hit my face like needles as I ran blindly along the road, slipping and falling, my breath burning in my chest. When I looked back, she wasn't at the car anymore. She was standing in the middle of the road, facing me, unmoving. Even through the storm, I could see her eyes, dark, bottomless, watching me as if she could see straight through me. I kept running until I saw faint lights in the distance. A small diner sat by the road, windows glowing like a lighthouse in the blizzard. I burst through the door, gasping for breath, my clothes covered in snow. The few people inside stared at me, startled. I tried to explain what happened, but the words tangled in my throat. The owner, a heavy man with kind eyes, poured me a hot coffee and told me to sit down. When I finally managed to speak, I described the woman on the road. His expression changed instantly. The diner went quiet. He told me a story that made my blood freeze more than the storm. Years ago, a young woman was traveling that same road in a storm just like the one outside. Her car slid off the road and into a ditch. She tried to walk for help, but froze to death before reaching town. Since then, drivers claimed to see her wandering the storm, searching for someone who would stop, someone who would help her reach the place she never made it to in life. I didn't sleep that night. When the storm finally passed, the owner drove me back to my car. We found it exactly where I left it, except the passenger window. The one she touched was covered in frost, shaped exactly like a handprint. The owner scraped it off without a word. I never drive in winter storms anymore. Sometimes, when snow falls heavily and the world turns white, I think about that woman standing alone in the cold, waiting for someone to notice her. And I pray I never see her again.
I spent one winter working alone as a ranger in the mountains of northern Wyoming, living in a small wooden cabin built long before I was born. People think winter in the mountains is peaceful, but it isn't. The silence there feels alive, like the world is holding its breath and waiting for something to happen. On my fourth night at the station, during a heavy snowstorm, I was sitting by the window with a cup of weak coffee when I noticed a shape standing in the clearing outside. At first, I thought it was a tree stump, but then it moved, just a small shift, enough to make my heart jump. I grabbed my flashlight and pointed it outside. A man was standing completely still in the snow, facing my cabin. He wore only a thin shirt and pants, no jacket, no boots, nothing a normal person could survive in. I tried shouting through the glass, but the wind swallowed every sound. When I opened the door to check on him, the clearing was empty. No footprints, no marks, nothing. I stayed outside for a minute, confused and uneasy, before locking the door and telling myself I had imagined it. 2 nights later, something woke me. It was a soft, slow scratching on the outside wall of the cabin. I froze in my bed, listening as the sound moved along the wood, closer and closer to the window. When I finally gathered the courage to look up, I saw a hand pressed against the glass. Its fingers were long, too long, and stretched in a strange way like the cold had pulled them apart. The nails dragged down the window in a slow, painful sound that made my skin crawl. I couldn't move. After a few seconds, the hand slipped away, fading into the darkness, and I sat there shaking until morning. When daylight came, I forced myself to go outside. Behind the cabin, I found a line of footprints, bare, human footprints, leading straight from the forest to my window. But what scared me most was that the footprints ended there. No returning tracks, no trail leading away, just a pair of prints standing right at the wall as if the person had vanished into the cabin. I took pictures and sent them to my supervisor, who called me immediately. His voice was tense as he told me to stay inside and not open the door at night under any circumstances. That night, the storm returned with violent force. The wind screamed against the cabin so loudly it felt like something was trying to tear the walls apart. Sometime after midnight, the radio on my desk switched on by itself. At first, it was nothing but static, but then I heard breathing, slow, heavy breathing, close to the microphone. I whispered, "Who is this?" And the breathing stopped. For a moment, the cabin was frozen in silence. Then, a soft voice whispered, "Cold. Let me in." I stumbled back and shut the radio off, but immediately after, something hit the cabin door. A heavy, solid thud. Then another and another. I grabbed my rifle and shouted that I was armed. The pounding stopped instantly. I held the rifle up, waiting, listening. Then, a quiet voice spoke through the door. My name. Hearing it made my blood turn cold. I didn't open the door. I didn't move. I stood there until the sky turned pale with morning light. My supervisor sent a rescue team the next day, but they wouldn't arrive until late. That last night was the quietest I had ever experienced. No wind, no storm, not even the groan of the cabin. Around midnight, the radio turned on once more. This time, I heard my own voice, repeating something I had said days earlier, copying my tone exactly. Then the voice whispered, "Turn around." I didn't want to. Every instinct begged me not to, but something made me look toward the window. He was standing there, the same man, the same thin shirt, the same frozen, empty face. His skin was pale and tight, his eyes dull and lifeless, and he stood only inches from the glass, staring at me without blinking. I dropped to the floor and covered my head, unable to look at him. I stayed that way until I heard the rescue team banging on the door in the morning. They found me shaking on the floor, half conscious. Outside, the snow was untouched. No footprints, no tracks, nothing but a perfect white sheet. When my supervisor arrived, he didn't ask questions. He just looked at me with tired eyes and said, "You lasted longer than most." I quit the job that day. I never went back to the mountains. But even now, years later, every winter, when the world grows quiet and still, I sometimes hear a faint whisper behind me, "Let me in."
Winter hides many things. Footsteps, voices, shadows in the storm. We think cold keeps danger away, but sometimes cold is exactly what brings it closer. If you want more true horror stories like these, let me know. And remember, snow keeps footprints, but not everything that walks in winter leaves them.